It's up to you, Samuel.
Yes, Kak.
All right, OG complete, and OO, are you complete?
Yes. Sorry, Kak. May I go to toilet first?
Yeah, sure. Just make it quick,
Okay.
like 1 minute. All right. OO, are you complete? Sorry.
Yes, complete.
All right, perfect. Closing government, are you complete?
Yes, we are.
All right. And we have closing opposition.
We are complete.
All right, perfect. And I would like to call my panel, Himalaya. Are you here?
Yes, here.
All right. And my trainee, Dina, are you here?
Here, Kak.
Dina, are you here?
Yes, Kak, I'm here. Check. Yeah, I'm here.
Oh yeah, sure. So we're waiting for OG to complete. Please, OG, respond if you're complete as fast as possible. All right, so OG complete. So we're going to start this round. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the fifth round of NOVED 2021. Under the motions, as China, this House will intervene and support and democratization of Myanmar. I'm Anga, I'll be your chair for this round. Gender pronunciation is he or him. Just a quick note for all of you guys, please, before you start the speech, state your gender pronunciation and also your POI preference to make the debate more smooth. And I would like to encourage for all of you guys to time keep by your own self, but at the same time, I will also do time keep, and I will state what times in the chat box. All right, without further ado, I'd like to call the Prime Minister to start the debate. Here.
Okay, am I audible?
Yep, you're audible.
My gender pronunciation is she or her, and if you have any VOI, just unmute yourself. Ladies and gentlemen, we can see in our status quo that Myanmar is having chaos inside their country, which is there is a tension between the military and also the previous government. And it is caused because of the previous government is actually corrupt and there's so many violations to the right of citizens. So that's why they want a democratization and the government will be taken by the military. The problem happened is that the Myanmar is still cannot solving their problem, and also their military is actually seeking for a kind of support outside Myanmar. So that's why our stance as China, we are going to intervene and support the democratization of Myanmar because we want to strengthen our relation and spread our influence as a nation. Two things that I want to bring in this debate. Number one is why it is justified for us to intervene in them. Before that, what we're going to do in intervening the problem in Myanmar is we're going to supply army and also we're going to supply resources to Myanmar, and because we want to give protection for the citizen and support the military, and we're going to support the notion of going to the democratization as their backup. Why we think that we are justified to do this? Number one is because we have an agenda in China that we want to be the most influential nation in this world, and to do that, we need to build a relation with Asian nation and included Myanmar. And also, since we have more resources, we have more responsibility to actually help the our neighborhood nation. Also, not just that, we also have we want to be influential in terms of economy and ideology also. So that's why we need to make sure that our economy relation between all the nation in the Asian is in control. So that's why we think it is better for us to just intervene and not make the problem in Myanmar getting longer and longer. Because why? Because we have relation between China and Myanmar that actually we are the oil supplier for Myanmar, and also we have invest in some industry and business in Myanmar. If the condition is in Myanmar getting worse and worse and not getting better, it means that it will affect not their economy and their condition, but also the economy of China itself. So that's why we think it is necessary for us to help them in order to help ourselves. Not just that, the other benefit of helping them is number one, it will give it the easiness for us to get access for business relation in the further in the future. Why? We can see that the Myanmar now is going to create a new nation. They will create a new government, and also they will create a new regulation. If they know that we help them and we are supporting them fully, it will give benefit to us in the future. If we have, for example, we want to make a contract in terms of economy, in terms of education, or so on and so forth, it means that it will be easier for us to get what we want from them. And next, we also can see how is the condition in Myanmar. In Myanmar, there's so many chaos that leads us to many victims because of massive demonstration. Not just that, they are also blocking the social media, the citizens' social media, and the tension there is very high. And there are so many kidnapping and so on and so forth, and it is very bad. The impact itself is not just in the country, but also in another country. For example, like export and import, not just in Myanmar, but also in Asia and including China, in terms of automotive, textile, business sector, and so on and so forth. Since because of that, it is better for us to solve this problem. So the flow of economy and the flow of political will be even will run smoothly, and we can get more benefit in that. Before that, any PI? Okay.
No, sorry.
Yes, please.
Okay, how do you ensure that this military intervention by China would not necessarily like create more problems?
Okay, why we think that it will not create more problems, because we can see that the condition in Myanmar right now is that the government and also the citizen is in a kind of quite weak condition, because they having this kind of tension for so long, and they have been fight for so long. So we think that it will be better for us to intervene and not creating problem, because we support what the society want. Our existence in there will not be opposed by the society, because the democratization is what the society want. What the society want is they want to end the corrupt government happened in the previous government, and they want to take down that government. So we think that it will not be problem for us. In moreover, it will our existence will be supported by the citizen there. So that's why it will give another benefit, which is in terms of ideology, it will be easier for us to spread the communist ideology, because what they want is in line with what with our idea. So that's why we think it's better for us to support and intervene them. Thank you.
Thank you very much for Prime Minister's speech. Now I'd like to call Leader of Opposition here.
Okay, wait. Am I audible?
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay, cool. Sorry. Wait. Okay. My gender pronouns are she, her. If you want to POI, just POI me through the chat. I will try my best to answer the POIs given. Okay. Starting my timer, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Our stance as opening opposition is very clear. As China, we don't want to intervene and support the democratization of Myanmar. We don't want to give them any support in regards to like military resources or whatsoever. We're just going to, if there emerges any conflict in borders of China and Myanmar, that's the time where we will act upon it, right? We will actively solve the conflict if it actually adhere with our interests as China, right? But few setups before I move on to rebuttals and my substantive, right? We think that the stance of China is, of course, to want to intervene if something can actually bring benefit for them, right? For instance, they actually intervene in the procession of like acquisition of South China Sea, exactly because it actually brings more resources to them, or how they intervene with South Asian economies for them to be a trading partner or helper, or how with the current vaccine diplomacy and all, we think that this China actually like works and like actively intervene and support something if it can actually bring benefit to their country. So this is something that is very important, because I never exactly heard any characterization on what kind of things that China will take an interest to. And we think that this debate also plays on the scenario and like which side that can fulfill China's interest more, right? Okay, on the current status quo, we think that I'm going to clear a few things a bit. First, we think that on the idea of like military coup in Myanmar, we think that the military coup is on the upper hand, right? Because they have the resources and they actually like taking over the government currently. But secondly, we also think that in the current status quo, we think that China still have like border relations with China and Myanmar. And we think that of course there still like exists the interest to keep their peace at their borders. But we think that this is going to be relying upon the idea that military coup that of course that is in power, it's going to like give them more peace and like give them the peace that they want in the border house, right? So we think that this is something that China wants. Few rebuttals. First, on the idea of military resources, we think that it's going to just create more problems, right? Exactly, because like Myanmar in itself actually have like military resources. They are like currently taking over the government. But secondly, we also think that this is not within the interest of China, right? Because China doesn't necessarily like want to support what the society wants, right? We think that on the idea of like China-Myanmar dispute, we think that it's going to be stability or like which kind of like power that what kind of like stronger power in Myanmar that China can actually like rely on to, right? Therefore, it's going to be like much easier for China to get into Myanmar, for them to have more stable economic relations, because they are actually like supporting like the stronger partner, that is the military group in itself, right? But thirdly, on the idea of like stability and whatsoever, right? We think that society in itself doesn't necessarily like want democratization, but therefore what they want is stability, right? If we go by the logic of government who say that the previous government is like corrupted and whatsoever, we question why then the society wants like the last government to like enter, right? We think that therefore the idea of democratization also revolves around the idea of like re-election and whatsoever, right? I'm going to bring two things. First, why democratization of Myanmar is not going to bring benefit to China, and therefore it is not within their interest. And second, what kind of governmental benefits that the government team benefits that we think that it's not going to also like manifest in real life, right? First of all, why democratization of Myanmar will not bring benefit? First of all, we think that on the principal level, China's Communist Party is of course is in power, right? China is a very, very socialist, and like the government actually like have a great controlling power, and we think that this in itself actually backlashes with the idea of democratization, where people are actually like have more power than the government. But secondly, we also think that in the idea of like pragmatic interest of China, we think that China wants to be the global superpower to beat US, right? The difference is that US is a democrat country, and China is not, right? When China supports the democratization of Myanmar, this means that at certain extent, China is being seen as like bowing down with the state form of US, right? Exactly, because they want to support the democratization. So we think that this is not within the interest of China, exactly because they want to like keep their state form, or like keep their state form and like their principle different with US, right? But thirdly, we also think that the fact that China economy is now very capitalistic, yet they still want to like they don't have the interest to change their state form with they don't have like the interest to have elections or like democratization in their own country. We think that this means that the democracy in itself is not within the interest of China, right? But yeah, on why if Myanmar is like democratic, within the and the leader and the previous leader, that is Sang Suu Kyi, is going to like be re-elected, why we think this is going to be harmful for China? Three things. First, we think that Sang Suu Kyi in itself is a peacemaker, right? So therefore, there are like a lot of human rights violation, and which are happening in China. It's going to be like questioned and like revealed by the previous leader, right? We think that this is going to be backlash, exactly because China does not want like other countries to intervene too much to their countries, and therefore we think that this is something that there will be like hampered if they actually support Sang Suu Kyi, right? But why Sang Suu Kyi would not have the interest to like be friends with China in itself, right? Exactly because China doesn't necessarily like have that kind of like interest at the very beginning, right? We think that the current leaders of Myanmar in itself actually like have also the knowledge that the China also like wants to help if there is like anything that they can get, and therefore we think that it's going to be harder for Sang Suu Kyi in itself to like trust China and like want to work with them. But secondly, we think that it's going to be harder for China to spread influence, exactly because the leader of the democratization is going to be like that anti to human rights violation, right? This means that if China wants to like go onto the project of BRI, I think that's going to be harder for them to opt in into Myanmar, because Myanmar did not necessarily like see China as the right helper because of the human rights violation and like the bad image and whatsoever. So we think that this is going to hamper even more the Chinese agenda. But thirdly, we also think that the Myanmar current military crop is going to be is like that powerful, and therefore it's going to be like much easier for China to just like rely on them, right? In comparison to like relying on the president who are not necessarily like going to be re-elected, right? We think that it's going to be the burden of opposition as well to prove to you like how does this democratization will manifest, and what kind of like end results they want, and how this is the interest of China. Very proud to oppose.
All right, thank you very much for leader of opposition. I'd like to call Deputy Prime Minister here.
Hello, am I audible?
Yep, you're audible.
Okay, great. Okay, I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, we all know that this crisis might happen like give a big impact through this Myanmar. Like we also know that there is a public protest and also military boycott in this Myanmar that will affect Myanmar as a whole, and especially in terms of economy. So that's why we say that as a government, China is here, because we say that China is concerned in response to this crisis, that they will help this Myanmar to overcome from this crisis as well. Because China, in the end of the day, encourage and to strengthen the relations between the government and also military there in order to solve the problem. It proves to you that China also have power to solve this problem, ladies and gentlemen. So that's why we as the government want to China to intervene this issue in order to solve this problem. So let's see. First, let's see what is China's interest. Yes, we admit that China has a power, but also China has interest to build a relations between the ASEAN. So that's why Belt and Road Initiative exists, where it also wider the relations with ASEAN countries, and also, that's why this is the purposes that China's want to strengthen the relationship. I will explain this benefits. So I have two things in my speech, and why China could solve this crisis towards Myanmar, and while it will strengthen the Belt and Road Initiative purposes that created with China. Number one, why China could solve this crisis, ladies and gentlemen. First, I will talk about what society care for. Society care for in the Myanmar is that they want to live peacefully and also be protected, because this crisis also affect those people in Myanmar. We also know that China and Myanmar also have the same ways, where it also create a sense belonging between China and also Myanmar. So that's why we say that it's justified for China to help Myanmar as well. Moreover, China also as #1 supplier for Myanmar, such as gas and also oil, ladies and gentlemen. It proves to you that Myanmar also need help for China as well. So that's why we say that. China is also create a dominant economy cycle in Myanmar. So it shows that it creates a mutual benefit towards Myanmar and also China, ladies and gentlemen, where it creates also protections to save the economy. If in comparison to OO, if China is not intervening in Myanmar, we believe that trading will stop, because China has a power to stop that. So that's why it's also affect in Myanmar, where they're not able to survive or to overcome from economic issue. If they say that we never give why we as China want to intervene and why it will benefit to us, we already say that it will give a benefit in terms of economy and also ideology influence. The problem is that all need to tell you how Myanmar can cope up by itself, where they also lack of ideology, where also crisis also there, ladies and gentlemen, because we believe that China has power to for example, they have to able to intervene US to solve the problem, for example, that will also affect Myanmar. So in our aftermath itself, it will create a sustainable government in Myanmar, where Myanmar also engage with China as well. So that's why we say that it will solve the crisis between China and also Myanmar. Another example where China is also succeed in solving the Rohingya crisis in Myanmar. It proves to you that China can also solve the problem there, ladies and gentlemen. In comparison to opening up positions, they need to prove that why Myanmar can come up by themselves alone, rather than we need help for China in the end of the day. Second, why it will strengthen the Belt and Road Initiative. Ladies and gentlemen, let's see that the interest of China to create this, it is create BRI that will also, in terms of infrastructure development and investment, to embrace other countries. So that's why we say that this Myanmar need this, ladies and gentlemen, because they are currently struggling from crisis. So because the problem is that the impact of crisis that Myanmar had, it also decreased the income of Asian country as a whole, and also affect business sector, not only in Myanmar, but also ASEAN as a whole. That's why we need China, who has a power to solve this problem, ladies and gentlemen. Because so in the end of the day, we say that why then capitalist that China has is okay, because we already characterize the China, yes, even if they have certain purpose in BRI, but they still lesser evil, where they are able to help those countries to survive or to create a development in their country, ladies and gentlemen. So that's why it gives a benefit for BRI members, where also it also creates a development for the country itself. If you're talking about stability, ladies and gentlemen, China wants to keep stability. if opposition side of the house said that China wants to get stability, exactly, because they want stability in our side of the house, where their neighborhood will also with Myanmar, ladies and gentlemen, to keep stability in borders. So that's why we say that intervene is needed, because we all know that crisis is also time-sensitive issue, that we need to solve this this before it spread in neighborhood country. In status quo, this crisis is already chaos, ladies and gentlemen. So that's why China should take a hand to help this, to create a better environment, also prevent tensions in the end of the day. So that's why we say that why China could solve this crisis, because one, they have a power to do this, and also have same race with the Myanmar, for example. So that's why it creates a sense of belonging to help this problem that exists in the Yemen. Even if this problem will not solve, why still find in our side? At least we maintain the relationship with in China and also Myanmar before. Because why this is important? Because Myanmar still need China to develop themselves. That's why if they are being independent, they still cannot being independent, ladies and gentlemen, to create a development. So that's why we need China to solve the crisis that exists in the society. That's all from Uji. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for Deputy Prime Minister. Now I would like to call Deputy Leader of Opposition. Here.
If you want to do, wait. Okay, if you want to do a POI, just unmute yourself. I'll probably take one before my rebuttal. Wait, okay. So, my speech in 3, 2, 1. What happened in government team is they never exactly explain what kind of end result that they expect from democratization. Therefore, we think that this is a very shaky ground that we can operate in our set of house. So first clash, and the only clash that I have in this case, which is the Chinese agenda, right? In the best case of government, in the government side, is that you will make a better image of China, because now currently China have bad image because of the COVID-19, for example, the South China dispute and etc. Right? How then this to flipping this kind of image is not going to be that easy under government for several reasons. Number one, to flip image from bad China to get good China is not that easy, right? We think that international society has already have the image that China, how China will behave, right? Like for example, China is interventionist and etc. Right? So this has already been the for so long. This is already been the image of China. So even if, let's say, countries like US, so that is why, like for example, countries like US still putting their army in the South China Sea, the South China Sea, even though ASEAN and China has already non-interference treaty to not getting one of that island anymore. US still be skeptic. US still be skeptic with China, right? That is why to flip this image is not that easy. Secondly, we think that this Western country will not just easily trust China the moment that China will be helping Myanmar, right? Because they know the inherent characterization of China, who wanted to be the global superpower. So it means that just because China do just one good thing, it's not like instantly West gonna believe that China has already changed. Because, for example, China is still supplying and also supporting North Korea's military and nuclear. So there's military and nuclear, like they're still investing in military heavily and etc. That is why China, at the end of the day, will not be seen as a good actor. But thirdly, to make Myanmar to be more peaceful, like what Uji say, is this also untrue, right? Because we think that there are still many other human rights violation that is done by China in the inside of the country itself. If you wanted to, like for example, finishing creating better image, you can just as China, you can just easily reveal what will actually happen in Uyghur, for example. This thing is this takes China less resources. This is cheaper, and this you also can gain trust from the democratic Muslim country, for example. But this is also unlikely to be done by China, because then this will only like reveal the whole bad things that China do. Just revealing that we are doing human rights violation. But the fact that they're still have the interest to hide it and etc. It means that China still wanted to protecting the current image and doesn't want to like changing the image whatsoever. But fourthly, we think that this is at the end of the day will not be strategic for China, because now China will be seen that you will only do more, there will be a lot more skepticism for China, because they will be seen like, okay, you're not just doing good things at the beginning, but at the end you will be asking for something very huge, like what happened in the debt threat, for example. That is why at the end this will not give a betterment to the Chinese image and EPOI. No, okay.
Yeah,
So
I
move
here.
to okay.
So, you say that if the military is overthrown and like it will be pro-democratic, then the Myanmar won't be working with China because of human rights violation. But the fact that Aung San Suu Kyi also have human rights violations with Rohingya, what do you say about that?
Okay, so yeah, it's in my rebuttal, like why Sang Suu Kyi will not helping in lining with China whatsoever. Okay, so basically OG says that number one, OG says that you will be giving the business relation, it's gonna be good for the business relation with China, right? We think that this is untrue for several reasons. Number one, we think that Sang Suu Kyi is a humanitarian protection, right? You still have the model of politics is very different between Sang Suu Kyi and also China, right? Sang Suu Kyi will easily when you said that when I don't know who's the CG said that Sang Suu Kyi is still doing that humanitarian violation to Rohingya, but this is not like the scale of the violation is not as big as what China did, right? So that's why at the end of the day, their model of politics still different. That is why even at best you can get better image by helping Sang Suu Kyi. She will not trust you because trust you with your agenda, because you still do many human rights violation that is much worse than what she did. What she did, right? But secondly, what happened in the government is that Sang Suu Kyi will be more likely to believe to other states that is already democratic, like for example EU and US, that already have the image as a non-human rights violator, and also have many resources as well to help Myanmar to get better life. Like for example, placing US MNCs that have a better, effect for Myanmar and developing, rather than choosing the Chinese debt trap, Chinese debt that will only lead to debt trap. But thirdly, even at best, now Sang Suu Kyi can want to accept and be your friend. We think that this is much harder for China then to spread the influence, because you don't really know about Sang Suu Kyi, right? The one that you really know is that those military people. That is why the leader that is chosen at the end is the military. When the leader is chosen at the end is the military, this is much easier for you to do compromises, etc. Because the relationship and the model of you showing the political kind of thing is the same, right? Because you are doing the military interventionist and etc. Right? But fourthly, we think that Myanmar will not just easily stop trading with China the moment China will not helping them, right? Because China is already that influential in business. There are already a lot of Chinese product spreading in everywhere, right? That is why Myanmar cannot just easily stop the trading, because they are already dependent those Chinese products. But what happened in the government is that their skepticism will lead into like, okay, now I believe to China, and this will only lead me to like more dependency towards Chinese product. This will not bring me any benefit economically and etc. That is why if you wanted to build more BRI, this is much harder in yours, much harder as well in your side of the house. But for fifthly, I think that on Rohingya Musi, what China does is pushing them to other countries like Bangladesh, right? At the end of the day, they will not also like wanted to helping the refugee, right? But because the point is, China will not, it's not that nice and accommodating when this kind of helping will not bring any benefit to them, right? That is a benefit to them. So second rebuttal towards Uji that when they say that, China wanted to be mediator between government and military, we say that number one, we both sides agree that China actually have the power to be mediator, right? But the fact that they already still have many disputes with many countries by their interventionist action, meaning that China will only help vulnerable country when that brings the most benefit to them. That's why they wanted to bring build BRI in lower economic country, because this will create a dependency effect to China, because no country will have, because no one is cheap as China, for example. But secondly, even if they can solve the problem of Rohingya, we think that this action is not also supporting the democratization, and will only like be giving better image to China. But we already proved to you why giving creating better image will not work. At the end of the day, we win this debate. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for Deputy Leader of Opposition. Now I'd like to call government member here.
Hi, am I audible?
Yep, you're audible.
Wait, I'll put my speaker position. Forgot. All right. No preferred gender pronouns. If you have a POI, please unmute yourself because I won't be reading chat. Otherwise, I won't be taking it. I'll take and also take one before 6. So feel free to give, but please unmute, yeah. All right. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Notice that the opening debate have been totally unexclusive, right? Because they haven't shown they haven't really analyzed on what the Chinese interest wants and what will happen to China if the Myanmar becomes like an unstable part of like the FTA ecosystem and the BRI that they want to try to protect, right? And so I think like, oh, why you should be better than opening at least at the top of opening government, because like actually we're going to analyze what China wants in the context of this region and what makes this intervention exclusive. Like they never explain like why Myanmar in the first place, like what makes Myanmar so important as a country, because like the fact that the benefits they can get is also like applicable to other regions. So, like, why Myanmar exclusive? I think this is what CG will bring most important in this debate. So for several responses to the opening opposition case, right? First, I think like the idea of inconsistent ideology becomes like really unimportant because, and also doesn't happen because the incentive of China is doing this isn't because they suddenly change ideology, but because of pragmatic reasons, right? Which I'll really explain a lot in my substantive, right? Then the reason that they say that, oh no, Myanmar will not be like siding with China anymore, like the fact that notice that the one that they're trying to bring, the San Suu Kyi, also have like the mighty idea for it. They have human rights violations with her inaction with the Hong Yan Road. Notice that the only response is saying the scale is not big. Okay, like I just know that genocide is a small thing, but my point is showing that Suu Kyi doesn't have the moral standards that O wants to portray it. And the most problematic is that O incorrectly try to frame relations, even though like relation with China especially is built on pragmatism, right? They never talk about that. They only see like, oh, the leader of this country is like moral standards that are like with standard with China. So like I think the case totally falls, right? Because like pragmatism is like why there isn't like quote unquote more moral countries like Indonesia or Singapore choose to strengthen relations with China, right? Because it's all pragmatism, right? And like even if all of this is like true, like it's still better for China because it will lead to it will lead to stability in the region, and why I'll explain later. So that's the fact that they want to maintain like autonomous interest in Myanmar doesn't become really important anymore, right? Because this is all about the macro scale of the debate, right? And the fact of like that's the idea of like stopping trade also becomes like really unimportant because like the fact that China is like already sufficient enough, they don't really need Myanmar for like having the market, but like having this what Myanmar have is like this strategic position in SCA, which I'll explain later on why this is like so jeopardizing, right? So now I'll at one point of mechanization, right? How will China intervene? I think the best way they'll intervene is like pushing political pressure against the military by cutting off the infrastructure investments, right? And so maybe like we can add on that from the opening government's mechanism, because like first, I think it is in China's interest to build a more stable Myanmar because like 2 points. Right? First, like on the surface level, it will improve like China's image, right? It will like from the government, it will make them look better, more morally virtuous, and it shows that the government needs to have approval from people, because this is the difference between authoritarian China and authoritarian Myanmar. Like authoritarian China, they actually try to make their people happy, right? They actually try to open the market and like engage in like things that will make the people prosperous, so they get approval. And Myanmar doesn't do any of this, right? So the fact that what is most important in the government is approval from its people, right? And this is what differentiates and why China is like in the right to do so. They won't look bad if they try to intervene into like an authoritarian government, right? Because like the West is always portraying China as super bad, even though like they're not that morally like black and white, right? Because like they recognize the importance of like the validation. And this is also like if give more approval to the government, like people will be like more buying into the nationalist narratives and push away the bad narratives that the Western society claims that, oh, China is like super evil, and like this will lead to more like validation from the SCA region as a whole, right? Because like even though like China has like so many crackdowns, but China is able to protect this like is able to like stability the region. It will even give like the China this kind of political leverage, which makes them like being more supported by SCA, because like most of the SCA countries, you got many of the SCA countries is also like not political, not black and white, they don't like totally like pro US or pro China, right? Then the fact that they want to protect BRI, this is like what's really important. Notice that opening characterize China's interest in BRI based on how they want to embrace the country into BRI, but the fact that they analyze the macro analysis on why BRI is like already laid down and why stability of the region is to preserve, right? They notice in order to protect the investment, the BRI, they need the BRI, which is like really focused on the SCA region, especially because like SCA is such a huge trading port. It's like a connector, and thus if you have like one country which is like unstable and like there's like it will be so much harder to maintain all these trade routes. It will be so much harder because like maybe one day you can access this port because it's under military intervention, because it's under military junta and it's under lockdown. So thus having this like trade route being cut potentially unstable, this is like really harmful because there will be like passage routes both, and the BRI that they invested so much money on will be so much more inefficient, right?
Yeah.
And like this is also a form to grab hold on the SCA region because it's also risking that, right? Because this like BRI is a form of like consulting China power in the SCA region. Now the ability to do so, like China, they never also explain like China have the ability to do so because like China is like SCA is like one of the China is like one of the biggest trading partners of SCA, and especially with the context of Myanmar having such an unpopular government, China have this super huge leverage power, right? Do I hear a point before? I'll take one.
Yes. Okay. All right. How are you going to ensure more stability if you are going to remove the military power within democratization, knowing that the history of Myanmar is dominated with the role of like military as their protector?
All right, I'll explain later on why the rolling back will not happen again, right? It's in my last one. No, now lastly, like with the unpopular government, like Myanmar China have this leverage because like countries that still do this, they don't have like economic support, right? Because they're like being done by so many countries. Like for example, North Korea is like being supported by China, and thus if China have this incentive, they have this leverage in order to take away this Myanmar sustainability, then it will lead to the conditions collapsing, and it will actually lead to people even revolting even more, right? People who is actually maybe they don't really care, they're fine with the junta and not totally pro-democratic, but when they see that their life is suffering, this is like something they'll step in, right? So they have this unique military strategy, this unique strategic leverage. They can punish Myanmar so effectively without having to expend huge resources, like by deploying military, like how US does intervention. And this is exclusive to China-Myanmar relationship. And lastly, how this will lead to a more stable SCA, right? Because military juntas will be afraid to overthrow countries like Thailand will be like, maybe something like Thailand, they will be more afraid to overthrow it by seeing these precedents that such a huge military power and such a huge economic leverage holder near them. It's like actually like intervening, right? And this actually validates the strong relations. And given that the SCA wants to create a more stable region, especially in the context that SCA have a non-interventionist policies among its members, meaning they have to rely on external forces to create stability, right? Because it's like stability issues that becomes like really apparent when this kind of things happen. Now, what are the outcomes of this? What I've brought you now, this shown you that China have better validation in the eyes of political scene, protect their really important investment, and gain better political leverage in the SCA. This is something exclusive life in our side, and especially in the SAU that is like bilateral, it will choose China to be more friendly to them. Proud to propose.
All right, thank you very much for our government member. Now I'd like to call opposition member here.
Yes, am I audible?
Yep, you're audible.
Okay, cool. If anyone wants to POI, feel free to do so from the chat. I don't really have any preferred gender pronoun. Okay, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Let's get the government bench out of this debate, right? Because we think that we shouldn't be really talking about Myanmar's interest, because it has never been China's interest to like help Myanmar or like look good in the first place, right? But second, we think that they have never really mechanized on how are they going to succeed in like doing this military intervention on the like cost and benefit, because they have to manage to prove about why the benefit will outweigh the cost. So therefore, we think that both of their cases have already fallen, right? We think that they also always argue about how Myanmar is exclusive to China, but we think that it's very untrue, right? Because we think that Myanmar also have ties with other countries, but there's a reason why other countries do not want to intervene with Myanmar, right? Because the cost is simply too high. But we think that the same thing also applies to China, about how China still have other allies to trade to, about how China still have other countries to cooperate within the BRI, about how China is like increasing cooperation with India, for example. So we think that it's not like Myanmar is an exclusive ally of China that needs to be helped, right? But second, we think that even though we appreciate that OO has helped to steer the debate in talking about the China's interest, however, we think that they haven't mechanized and crystallized like how does having BRI means and how does those interests specifically affect intervention in Myanmar. So what is CO going to do? We think that CO is going to break down one by one on the interests of China, and we're going to mechanize it and why it directly clashes with the interest to actually go to war for Myanmar, right? So stance on the closing opposition for clarification. What do we want in CO? We think that in CO, what do we want is that we want to maintain our hegemony, but not from interventions and democratization, but we're going to use the usual China approach here. For example, we're going to use economic trade and online BRI, for example, or penetrating India or South Asia market, or like taking over the semiconductor industry, for example. So what we're going to do is that we're going to pump up more on our like economic benefit instead of like wasting our money and capital and resources for like this intervention that is not worth it, right? So going directly into my contribution, right? We are going to bring three things. Firstly, about the China ideology on their reputation, second on economy, and lastly on their military, right? But firstly, talking about reputation, this is directly engaging to OG and CG, who both try to argue about China wanting to look good, right? We think that this is not going to work anyway, right? If you want to start portraying China as this really good messiah country of helping other countries, we think that this is not going to work anyway, because we think that other countries are already seeing China as an evil actor, right? So we think that it's not going to work anyway, because the fact that China are still silencing like the Hong Kong protesters, for example, or doing the human rights violation against the Uyghurs. So we think that the perception of China in the global level is already in the net negative anyway, right? So simply doing this is not going to be that effective because there's still other parts where China is still seen as a bad actor. But second, we think that even if in our side we are also seen like as a bad actor, we think that it's okay, right? We think that China has always been fine economically, and when it comes to trading or like sustainability within other with the other cooperation, we think that China has always been fine despite being seen with bad reputation, right? So going to continue to my second argument about economy. Why is it okay to not have good reputation? Because the fact that China's strength is always on the market and trade, about how China is able to provide really cheap products, about how China gives a lot of like strategic trade route, for example. We think that the fact that we have this specific uniqueness and how we are able to be a good trading partner with other countries, we think that even if other countries do not want to rely on us, we think that the private sector of the economy is going to work with us, right? Or other countries who are willing to, maybe sacrifice their ideology because they rely on us, because they rely on our cheap products, are still going to like cooperate with us, right? But even if you try to argue that it's still the interest of China to be seen as good about caring reputation, for example, we think that China will still have to maintain their economic benefit, right? Considering that they still have things like BRI, about how they still have to like maintain influence in India and stuff. So we think that at the end of the day, they still have to maintain this economic interest anyway, right? But okay, engaging directly to CG2, they try to argue to you about how going to war suddenly means that it's going to create more stability, for example. We think that there's no likelihood explanation on that, right? We think that we are going to use structural reasoning why that's not the case. Firstly, we think that when you go to war, when you start to actually like send your troops and help intervening, what's going to happen is that you're going to create even more unstable regions, right? The fact that you are sending interventions, the fact that you are sending rations or like troops, is going to create the war to become longer, to create the war to become more unstable. So we think that what's going to happen is that the regions is going to be more unstable, right, in their side of the house. But second, we think that going to war goes against the current China interest, right? So before I contextualize that, POA from CG.
All right, I actually mechanized before that intervention is not only like military, but it can also be done effectively economically. How do you answer that?
Okay, but even if
That's my
it's
case.
economic, oh, sorry, okay. Okay, sorry. So even if you try to argue about how you're going to, intervene economically, we think that it hampers China's interest to like be able to independently, try to achieve as much profit as possible, right? So we think that it's still against China's current interest anyway. So how are we going to contextualize? And this is something that OO have failed to explain too, right? About what is the current China interest right now. We think that China's interest is inherently they want the economy to flourish, right? Like for example, the fact that they are creating programs like BRI, for example, the fact that they are building relationship with India, and we have to admit that it's going to need a lot of money, right? This is not something that you can like simply just do and ignore, right? It's not something that you can only passively do, but this is something that you need to actually build through, for example, build through an infrastructure, for example, about how you need a lot of money to like ramp up the technology to be able to like create a superconductor for a semiconductor, for example, in order to like trade more with India and or South Asia countries. You need to be able to like push infrastructures and push like the more investment to those countries, right? So we think that the fact that the moment you start to intervene, or the moment you start to intervene both military and economically, we think that it's going to drain all of those money, right? And send it toward the Myanmar. For example, you're going to, lose some sort of like money because you're sending troops and buying more weapons, for example, or you can like lose trading partner because you're trying to boycott certain actors, for example. So we think that when you intervene to Myanmar specifically, it drains your money, right? But second, we think that the difference between the military intervention between Myanmar and Taiwan is the fact that Taiwan is just simply much more profitable, right? Because Taiwan is ideologically, Taiwan was used to be part of China. But second, we think that Taiwan is also the biggest semiconductor producer, right? The fact that China has an interest to work with them and not with Myanmar makes them different, and this is why China wants to intervene. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Operation Member. Now I'd like to call Government Whip here.
All right. I just want to make sure if I'm audible.
Yep, you're audible.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. Name Satria. I have no preferred pronouns. It's okay. If you want a POI, I would highly appreciate it if you just interrupt my speech, because otherwise I won't be seeing the Zoom screens. Yeah, I think that's it, really. Right. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. So as China, this House would intervene and support the democratization of Myanmar under a few reasons why, but before that, a few general sights over this whole debate. I think that observing this whole debate has been very interesting, because from the opening benches, I think we've seen a lot of the perspectives of China and the interests of China, but we haven't seen anything further than that, and that's why we think that the closing bench is going to be better in comparison to the opening bench, because we're going to discuss a lot deeper, because we have discussed a lot deeper compared to the opening bench, based on the standpoint of international relationships, and we're going to show you why closing government has won over OO. So in comparison with OG, we're still better, because we believe that we're still better because we've shown that we're exclusive in context on why China particularly will be interested in Myanmar, as for reasons that has been stated by my first speaker, right? Now, a few things that I would like to point out is that because with comparison in OG, OG has been bringing to the table why China is going to be interested in intervening in Myanmar, but never showing to you why is it that we have to prioritize Myanmar and build connections there. And we've shown to you from my first speaker very we've shown to you, my first speaker have shown to you the step-by-step analysis as to why at the end of the day, China will have to intervene and support the democratization of Myanmar. And I think that's why we should trump over OG. Now, for OO, I think that we're still comparatively better than OO because unlike them, with an unclear better benefit with China, only throwing arguments on why this wouldn't work, that we still have debunked that. We still have debunked. We've shown clear benefit for China, and therefore I think the entirety of OO's case should be trumped over by CG. And now I'm going to make a response as to the previous speaker. So the previous speaker accused us of never mechanizing our mechanization of how we would intervene and democratize Myanmar. This I see this as something very dismissive because my first speaker has already stated our very well built mechanization, and I will just add that a little. I will add that slightly, is because China has the ability to do so. Southeast Asia has China as one of its main trading partners, and therefore this can be seen as a huge bargaining power. So. With an unpopular government and sanctions, Myanmar had to rely on countries that usually extend helping hand situations like this. But with China out of the picture, well, of course, they will suffer militarily. They also hold the BRI, and with the infrastructure funds being cut, this combined with decreasing economic conditions, and so therefore hampering the progress of the conditions in Myanmar. So China have this unique strategic position within the relationship. That's why we think that, and that is, I think, a mechanization that will work in this instance. And yes.
Will ASEAN instantly trust China while they still have the South China Sea dispute, for example?
Excuse me, I'm sorry, you were cutting up.
Will ASEAN instantly trust China when they still have South China Sea dispute?
Exactly what my first speaker said. The international relationships that has been going on within Southeast Asia, and especially with China, has been viewed from a very pragmatic logic. There has never been anything considered in more it's always been by far so far. The relationship that we have between countries has always been based on pragmatism and the benefits that they bring, right? And that's why, you know, a lot of countries, like especially Indonesia and for example Malaysia, even though we don't necessarily agree with the things that China does, like for example human rights violations, we still work to we still have economic relationships with each other. And South China Sea have been solved pragmatically. China didn't continue any further aggression after BRI starts happening. So yeah, there's that. And then another response I would like to make is that there has been reputation-wise, countries are already seeing China as evil actor, like the previous speaker had said. Well, no, still, many countries actually see pragmatically, since they're a huge source of investment, especially with China's IR actions, always based on pragmatism. The only countries that see China as evil is like, well, probably US watched, and it's always the problem is the problematic of West and the West and China, right? And as far as economic-wise, the way the previous speaker had already stated that it's going to hamper their profit if they're going to meddle within Myanmar. We believe that, we believe that it's okay, even if China's main interest is going to be earning profit within trading. It's going to be okay for them to meddle if it's going to be still okay for them to meddle within Myanmar, because if in the long term it'll result in more profit because of a stably established BRI, then we will have no problem with it. We don't have any problem with losing a bit of profit in order to gain more in the future. That's why we should prioritize BRI, and that's why we should prioritize democratization of Myanmar. And that's why, ladies and gentlemen, we believe as the government side of the House, we've won this debate, and especially being the closing government side of the House, we have won this debate. Oh, before that, the trade-off would be another point I would like to bring out, the trade-off would be insignificant and marginal, since most of the world is supporting for the return to democratization of Myanmar anyways, and the benefits for China would be massive for TG. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much for Government Whip. Now to close the entire debate, I would like to call Opposition Whip. Here.
Hello, I'm audible.
Yep, you're audible.
All right, if anyone wants to POI, just type in the chat, don't unmute. I'm going to be taking one from opening government if they have anything. If not, I'm going to be taking one from closing government. And also, I have no preferred gender pronouns. Right, I'm just going to begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Like exactly government said about how Indonesia sees China in a pragmatic way, ladies and gentlemen. This debate is not about things like such as reputation, right? It's about how countries view China, and mostly China will always be in control over their economic ties with other people, even though they may not actually necessarily agree with those particular notions and how China actually does things, ladies and gentlemen. So most likely what's going to happen under entire government bans is China is basically going to be burning money in Myanmar, basically trying to actually fix the problem that they soon be even fixing anyway, because that is not of their interest. I'm going to be talking about 3 things in this debate. Firstly, I'm going to talk about the OG benefit about trading with Myanmar, etc. Ladies and gentlemen. Secondly, I'm going to talk to you about economic relations. Secondly, and thirdly, I'm going to also talk about military POI through the chat. So firstly, I'm going to talk about whether or we can actually have good relations with Myanmar under outside of the house. Also, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I'm quite confused as to why other countries is actually not actually going into intervening to Myanmar, ladies and gentlemen, right? Because exactly like opening government and closing government said, if countries also have other ties with Myanmar, for example, most likely these countries will also intervene in Myanmar, just like the logic that they use all for China as to why they most likely have an incentive to go to Myanmar, ladies and gentlemen. Countries like Indonesia and other Southeast Asian countries, for example, obviously have trade with Myanmar, but obviously they are not intervening. So that's the reason most likely they feel like this is something that's too costly for them to do so, for example, ladies and gentlemen, proving the point like my member actually brought to you, but how this is too actually costly to China at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. But secondly, most likely, even if it's going to be turning into a dictatorship, for example, most likely it's going to be okay anyway. I want you to notice that most likely the revolution coming from Myanmar, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be snuffed out in the next few months, or at the very least in the next year, ladies and gentlemen. The reason for this is number one, most likely the civilians that are actually fighting the military is already outgunned, ladies and gentlemen. Notice about how the civilians right now are being killed in Myanmar, for example, and most likely that meaning that the people's morale is going to be broken down. Secondly, people are literally being outmanned, ladies and gentlemen. That's to say, the military and Myanmar military have just tanks, etc. Most likely the people cannot actually fight against it, ladies and gentlemen. 30 people are obviously already tired of fighting against the Myanmar government, and they are tired of war, for example. And 40, most likely they're always going to have to go back to their normal lives because they have to still earn money for their family, and their family is starving, for example, ladies and gentlemen. What this means, most likely the revolution in Myanmar is going to end in a significant and a short amount of time anyway, ladies and gentlemen. But what's going to happen when you try to democratize it? Exactly, you're actually going to further destabilize it because you're going to be further prolonging the war, ladies and gentlemen. This actually breaks that book in opening bets because they just said about how this is not China's interest, but what is going to be the comparative and what's going to happen if you actually intervene? We actually understand, and I actually understand by saying that most likely the war is actually going to prolong, ladies and gentlemen, because notice that you're actually going to fight the military who actually have tanks, for example, who actually have just, for example, meaning that's going to be a war of attrition within China and Myanmar. Most likely it's going to actually further destabilize, ladies and gentlemen. In the comparative under opposition bans, then is that even if we are actually going to be a dictatorship, ladies and gentlemen, the conflict is actually going to end sooner because of the reasons I actually told you before. Because of this, we actually have more. We actually can actually resume the price of oil, for example, because I think there is also an interest coming from the dictatorship government or the military junta to continue actually having more ties with China, because obviously they need oil from China anyway, ladies and gentlemen, right? But 30, even if we cannot actually replace Myanmar, and even if the war is actually going to go on for longer if you don't intervene, it's okay, because what is the comparative of the cost? Number one, the comparative is, notice that China is not because notice that the entire government haven't actually, even though like the government said they mechanized because they said we want economic intervention, they never actually explain what is the likelihood of success of economic intervention, and opening government haven't said what's the likelihood of success of army, ladies and gentlemen. Notice about how China is still quite outdated in the standards of like everything besides manpower. That's the reason why they actually still import armaments like tanks, MBTs, jets, SU series, for example, from Russia, ladies and gentlemen, right? The thing is, ladies and gentlemen, meaning that China, in order to prepare for war to Myanmar, they're going to have to actually buy a lot of these things from Russia to actually go against Myanmar, ladies and gentlemen. Secondly, if you actually want to rely on manpower, notice that China is actually preparing to go to war with Taiwan right now, meaning that's 30% of our military gone. But notice that the other like 50% of our military is going to have to guard our borders with Russia and other countries, for example. So the last 20% of our military is going to have to go against Myanmar, Myanmar alone. This is obviously not good because we're actually going to have to go to a war over attrition, and most likely we're going to have to lose a lot of men, ladies and gentlemen. But thirdly, right, most likely this is not going to be good because we're actually going to lose a lot of men, for example, meaning that we're actually going to have to restructure our military again. We're actually going to conscript a lot of people. We're actually going to have to buy more MBTs and tanks because we lost them in the war against Myanmar, for example. I mean, there's a lot of economic costs regarding Myanmar. So even if we actually lose a valuable trading partner, it's okay because the economic cost of military and funding war is too high at the end of the day. Secondly, why do we think this is actually bad in terms of economics, ladies and gentlemen? My member already told you, and government have never actually debated three things, right? Number one, BRI. I know that this is something that already brought to you, but they never actually characterize what is the cost of BRI. We told you that BRI needs roads and ports, for example, that is spanning across the entire country. Notice when the China is actually going to Middle East, for example, they're actually literally building roads in every single state. They're building ports in every single seaport, for example, and obviously it takes a lot of money and it takes a lot of investment because it takes a long time. It's literally spanning the entire country. Secondly, we also told you about semiconductors, ladies and gentlemen. Notice about how Xi Jinping literally promised to the Chinese people that the China is going to be the marvel of technology in the future, ladies and gentlemen. And because they are being tired of being pushed around by the US to actually buy into the semiconductors that's being sold by the US, ladies and gentlemen. So China is actually number one. They're actually building foundry that literally cost billions of dollars in comparison to Chinese currency in order to build those foundries. But secondly, they're actually giving incentives to the less loyal Taiwanese people who are smart engineers in semiconductor, ladies and gentlemen, and actually buy them to go into China's side. So we actually have this particular incentive to actually save money in order to make sure this product actually goes right, ladies and gentlemen. But thirdly, ladies and gentlemen, notice we are also investing in our infrastructure, right? But before moving on, yes, Uji.
Yes, we can see in status quo that other countries like UK, EU, even UN is saying no about Myanmar, but China is actually taking steps to support Myanmar. So why you said that China is don't care at all about that?
Because I literally explained to you the cost and benefit analysis as I told you before. Yes, you can start all facts, but you didn't actually give us any structural reasoning as to why that might be the case. We actually give you structural reasoning, and that's why we should win because we have more contribution in that regard. So we already told you why semiconductors is an interest in China because obviously China wants to be seen as a market of technology, for example, and by actually investing in foundry and semiconductors, we can actually achieve that thing, and we do not have to rely on US in terms of technology, ladies and gentlemen. But thirdly, we also are going to have to build infrastructure. Notice that China is a hub for trading and also a hub for manufacturing online goods. For example, obviously we are also building factories, also we are empowering the people, etc. Notice that all these things are being done simultaneously by China. As you say, we are doing BRI in simultaneous with semiconductors, in simultaneous with infrastructure, or obviously this is a lot of cash, and the cash that is going to be drained under the government side when they actually invest in military. There's way less comparative. So the benefit of this is you obviously gain a trade market. Secondly, we gain more infrastructure, and thirdly, we gain more influence in other more powerful countries like India, which is in comparison way more powerful than Myanmar. Hence, the comparative is pretty clear. We should focus on other countries in BRI, semiconductor, and infrastructure. Secondly, let's talk about military, ladies and gentlemen. Because if you want to actually go for military, I think it's way strategic for you to save your military power for Taiwan, ladies and gentlemen. Because so that if you actually invade and intervene in Myanmar, you're not going to get anything because you're still going to democratize. Hence, you cannot actually have control over the country. But when you actually control Taiwan, for example, which is more feasible because it's way smaller, most likely you can actually gain the literal trade routes between South Korea and Japan, ladies and gentlemen. Meaning that we can actually control trade there, we can actually have tariffs there. Most likely we can also control our dominion about the South China Sea for controlling such a large part of trade there, ladies and gentlemen. So the comparative is clear. We get more economic benefits, we get more trade benefits, we get more influence over South China Sea if we actually invade Myanmar instead of if we actually invade Taiwan instead of Myanmar. And because of those reasons, we won this debate. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much for all questions. Wait for the debate. So I think that's all to conclude for fifth round for NOVED 2021. So for all debaters, you may stay in the Zoom, and I would like to call my panel and my trainee to mobilize yourself to Discord so we could do a deliberation and discussions there in room A6. And I wish for good luck for all debaters. Thank you.